Hey there, Chris here with Cohesive Friendship Unit. Just me today. Just want to wish everyone a happy new year, happy 2019. Hope everything goes well. Hope you guys have some fun partying, and hopefully 2019 is great for games and just great for everyone in general. Real quick, we are a gaming channel. If you have any ideas, please let us know in the comments. Let me know what you think of this video down in the comments. If you like the video, please throw us a like, and if you love us, sub us. Subscription enters you for a chance to win some Steam codes. You can check out the channel page. There's a video that will tell you all about that. Alright, so I was originally going to do a video or review for Red Dead Redemption 2, but I think this is really the thing that I wanted to nail down. Red Dead Redemption 2, at least for me, does something narratively in games that I don't think I've ever seen done. And Red Dead Redemption 2 is my personal game of the year. Of the four of us in Cohesive Friendship Unit, I was the only one who picked that, but I was the one who played it the most. So this video is coming from someone who thinks that this was my game of the year. Just take that with a grain of salt. I just want to start off by saying game stories usually suck. They're usually terrible. They don't hold a candle to a good book or a good movie or a good TV series for a number of reasons. I think maybe the last 15 years was really the point where we could start telling super good stories in games. I think we could have done it in the Super Nintendo, and there are some, like Chrono Trigger, great story, but those were fewer and far between. They relied a lot on text, a lot of translation problems, in general, just a smaller budget. It was a new medium. It was a new experience gaming. So it was the budget and the talent and the people involved. It hadn't blossomed yet, storytelling in games, but it did happen, and things have been getting better. But in general, I would say stories in games, getting a good one is very, very rare. And I think this year, for me at least, the only two games that had a good story, like a genuinely good story, would be Red Dead Redemption 2 and God of War. I just wanted to get that out of the way. But beyond that, it's very, very rare to actually utilize games to enhance the storytelling. Usually you play a game and there's a story plastered onto it. That's like 95% of games in my mind. Like you play the mission, you watch the cutscene, you play the mission, you watch the cutscene. And yes, you're kind of doing things that advance the story, but it's usually that superficial. And people always talk about how games have this potential to allow you to tell amazing stories, but I very rarely see it. And I just want to kind of go through a few examples of the last few generations of kind of the evolution of storytelling through game design, like actual gameplay, augmenting and enhancing the storytelling experience. And I think the first one that really, at least just like listening and watching critics, the first one that's sticking out in the past like 10-15 years was Bioshock. Bioshock had choices, and it was very binary. It was very black and white. It was kill the little sister, save the little sister, with saving the little sister reducing your ability for upgrades, and killing them enhancing your ability for upgrades. That's about as deep as it got, and the entire game was the same with the exception of the ending. So you're playing through the game, you're making these choices, and yeah, you feel something. You're like, oh, I'm killing a small girl, but ultimately you're just changing the ending. And in general, this is as far as most games go, I would say. Most games don't ever really go beyond changing the ending when it comes to choices. And they're usually superficial, black and white. There's no gray space. You're good or you're bad, quote unquote. Red Dead Redemption kind of does this. Speaking of which, we're going to start spoiling Red Dead Redemption 2. This is story-based discussion, so this from here on out, I would say spoilers. Thanks for being around up to this point, but Here we go. Yeah, Red Dead Redemption is a little guilty of this, but they do some other things. And when I say they're a little guilty of this, basically, at least for Arthur's ending, there's 4 different endings that are, at the end of the day, the result of more or less black and white decisions that you make throughout the game. And they are kind of, to an extent, gamified. Like, you can catch fish to become good, quote unquote. You can say hi to people like non-stop. You can just walk through Saint Denis and say hello, howdy, how you doing, and that will boost your morality. So to an extent, it's a little gamified, but they do other things, and I think a lot of people agree that was not like it wasn't very much pushed on you. Then the next game I kind of want to talk about is Mass Effect. They did a fairly this is a good example of melding narrative with gameplay, and at least melding decision making, which I would say decision making is a big part of Mass Effect's gameplay, that conversation wheel. So you're melding the two. You're going to have certain people live and certain people die, and certain missions open and certain missions closed, which is going to enhance your experience, and even the actual physiology, the visuals of Shepard. And this, what's more impressive was this carried on with reasonable success throughout multiple games. It was not perfect at the end, but for 85% of the journey, it was pretty convincing that you were experiencing a custom story based on what you did. If that customization even only boils down to who lives and who dies, at least you also got the in Mass Effect 2 especially, the special character missions. So doing extra missions with people would as the player have a tighter emotional bond with them, because you've been with them more, you've done more with them, you know more about their backstory. So when they do perish, or when it is time for someone to take the chopping block, you're likely going to stick with those who you've had more experience, had more things to do with. And I think that was for like the Xbox 360, PS3 era. Those were kind of the two that really stuck with me. Where BioShock a lot of reviewers talked about that. A lot of people talked about the decision making in 2007. And Mass Effect, a lot of people talked about how it was a unique experience for the player up through all 3 games. And we haven't seen that since then, really. In newer games, like Metal Gear Solid 5 and Breath of the Wild, I think are the best examples of this. Newer games have largely attempted to use their bigger, more immersive worlds and their smarter AI and their broader options, their less linear paths, to allow for kind of emerging gameplay, like situations that are not scripted, but the tools that the world provides allows for these crazy things to happen. And in this sense, the story's not going to change. Like Breath of the Wild, the story isn't going to really change. I mean, the completion part of the story will impact the story, but the actual doing of these random things, like Metal Gear Solid 5, just invading a base, just kind of going in and like capturing a bunch of people, or going through a mission that goes kind of AWOL. Like, they're unscripted things that happens. The story's still going to stay the same. You're still going to complete the mission and see the cutscene. But you get these personal stories throughout these missions. Like when everything goes AWOL and everybody, the whole base goes on red alert, so you have to squirt a water gun on the generator to put out the power so you can steal a truck and put the hostages in there instead of your original plan, which was to just free them and let them out quietly. That's like a personal story. That's like a water cooler story that you can tell someone at work, and that's something that sticks with you when you think of the game. You think of, oh yeah, that escape was really cool, even though it's not necessarily scripted. And that's kind of, in my mind, the last like 10 years of games trying to utilize the actual fact that it is a game to augment or enhance or develop a story. But let's get to Red Dead Redemption 2. It's been a while. So Red Dead Redemption 2 does something new for me. If anybody has any example of this happening again, please let me know in the comments, because it really impacted me. It's one of the reasons I think the story is so good. When the game came out, I checked out all the initial impressions, and I had played it a lot in the first like 2 days, so I kind of was up to par with a lot of the people on YouTube who were giving their like first 10-15 hour impressions. And I mostly agreed. A lot of people didn't really like being Arthur, especially compared to John. A lot of people didn't like what they were forced to be doing. A lot of people didn't like that they were forced to kind of beat people on trains. A lot of people didn't like the debt collecting. A lot of people didn't like that they had to be nasty and that there was no real decision that allowed otherwise. And this was almost universal. I mean, I checked out GameSpot, IGN, Game Informer, podcast, The Know. I really I watched all of these, and there was at least one person who really did not like this on all these panels. They were like, I do not like being Arthur. That is like my biggest issue with the game. I don't like being this terrible person. I don't like having no say in how terrible I'm being. And what this did was this created an emotional response in the player. Everyone who said that they didn't like doing these extreme acts, beating a sick man nearly to death for a few dollars, when you yourself have the money to absolve the debt, but the game won't let you. This is something that people are complaining about. And this allows the redemption arc, chapter 6, to be so incredibly strong. Because all of a sudden, the player is given the choice to waive debts. The player is given the choice to help others. The player is given the choice to absolve certain things. And it's generally much easier to boost your morality in chapter 6 because you're given so many options to be good, and it makes the most sense. It's one of those things where by the time you hit chapter 6, money is not really an issue. You have that, unless you're going crazy, you have at least a couple $1,000s. I was spending money pretty frivolously, and I had probably about $3,000 by the beginning of chapter 6. And all of a sudden I'm given the choice to waive, $25, $50 debts. Yeah, of course I'm going to do that. That literally means nothing to me. And it helps so many other people, and you know that Arthur's dying, and it points you in that direction. So this enhances a new emotional response in the player, and people start to kind of full circle on it. And this is impacted by the fact that the player isn't just watching. It'd be one thing if you watched, Breaking Bad, and you see somebody doing something horrible for the first 2 seasons, and then they kind of go through a redemption arc. You get to watch that. But in this, you're doing it. You're forced to be someone who's terrible, and then you're given the choice to not be terrible. And because you're physically doing it, and you know that you did those bad things before, you get that sense of redemption within yourself, and you get a more powerful impact, more powerful desire to act a certain way. And this strengthens the idea of the player being Arthur, going from bad to good, and it makes these moments much more believable and much more powerful. At least they did for me. And I don't think I've ever seen a game emulate this exact mechanic, where you're kind of forced to do something to elicit a response, where that response is manipulated later down the line for more powerful impact on the player. And I think, making these linear or these black and white morality choices back 10 plus years ago have their place, and while doing these emergent things in Metal Gear Solid and Breath of the Wild also have their place, I think this is even the next step. And Red Dead Redemption 2 utilizes all 3 of these things. You ultimately get to decide how Red Dead Redemption 2 ends for Arthur. Is a big emergent world where lots of things happen, and you get your own stories through those random events, just kind of running around. You'll see that little dot on your map, and you'll say, okay, I can act on this. And sometimes things go your way, sometimes they don't, and that's where the story comes from, the personal story. And then there's this new idea of the game is going to force you to do something that maybe you don't necessarily agree with, and then open up later and allow that decision to really shine for you. and allow you to make that attachment with a character that you wouldn't have been able to make in any other medium, really. And for me, that's what made Red Dead Redemption 2's story so good. It was already a good story, but that's what made it a good story within a game. But that's all for me. Again, hope you guys are having a good new year. I will catch you guys next time. Peace out.